All right, go ahead.
Okay, Hare Krishna, thank you so much. Dear devotees, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Great Deva, glories to Srila Prabhupada. Dear devotees, we are very blessed and very fortunate. Today we have Her Grace Malati Devi here with us, taking us into the nectarian SRIMAD BHAGAVATAM. And so we hope that you all stay awake, alert, and
Well, I hope I also stay awake and alert.
Well, we all hope it and pray. Hare Krishna, thank you so much, Mother. So I will be putting the verse on the screen, and Mother, you may begin. Hare Krishna.
Okay. So it's
You
only
may chant
80.
the Mangala Charan.
Okay.
Devotees will be joining. They are quite late lately.
Okay. Quite lately. Okay.
Yes. But they will be joining for sure.
Okay. Magyantamarandasya Dhanana Sakalaya Chaksum Militam Yena Tasme Sri Gurave Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavari Bhaskacharya Satarine Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vayevacha Patitanam Pavanibhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever the time is according to your location. So we're continuing the glorious Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, 1829. And this first canto is exceedingly important because, why? Because this is the first translation of the Bhagavatam brought by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada, to America when he arrived. It was in three parts, three books, but entire first canto. And he said at various times, one of which I was personally present, that everything I have to teach you is in these books. And these books at that time were the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. At one point when he was ill in New York City, and it wasn't sure what the outcome would be, he had His Grace Brahmananda Prabhu reading to him from the first canto, 8th chapter, the prayers of Queen Kunti. And that was all he was hearing. So today it's Bhagavatam first canto 18, chapter 18, verse 29. Abhuta purva sahasa prasutribhyam aditat mana brahmanam pratya buddham brahma matsaramanyurevacha. And the synonyms. Abhuta Purva, unprecedented, Sahasa, circumstantially, Shut, hunger, Trid, Guhyam, as well as by thirst, Adita, being distressed. I think that's a common condition nowadays, Adita, being distressed. Atmana, of his self, Brahmanam, unto a Brahmana, Pati, against, Adbhut, became, Brahman, O Brahmanas, Matsara, envious, Manhu, angry, Eva, thus, Cha, and translation by his divine grace. O Brahmanas, the circumstances having distressed him, meaning Parikshit Maharaj, having distressed him with extreme hunger and thirst, the king directed toward the sage his anger and envy, which he had never before directed towards a Brahmana. Purport. For a king like Maharaj Parikshit to become angry and envious, especially at a sage and Brahmana, was undoubtedly unprecedented. The king knew well that Brahmanas, sages, children, women, and old men are always beyond the jurisdiction of punishment. Similarly, the king, even though he commits a great mistake, is never to be considered a wrongdoer. But in this case, Maharaj Parikshit became angry and envious at the sage due to his thirst and hunger by the will of the Lord. The king was right to punish the subject for coldly receiving him or neglecting him. But because the culprit was a sage and a Brahmana, it was unprecedented. As the Lord is never envious of anyone, so also the Lord's devotee is never envious of anyone. The only justification for Maharaj Parikshit's behavior is that it was ordained by the Lord. Once again, the translation, O Brahmana, the circumstances having distressed him with extreme hunger and thirst, the king directed toward the sage his anger and envy, which he had never before directed towards a Brahmana. Overall, this chapter is like a treasure chest of gemstone instructions for devotees of all conditions, devotees in all circumstances, devotees of all levels. In the beginning, it reminds us that in all conditions, in all circumstances, the remembrance of Narayana is essential. And the devotee who remembers Narayana is described as Narayana Parayana and is constantly practicing to remember Narayana. And Maharaj Parikshit was such a pure devotee. Now, for a devotee, anything sent by God, Krishna, it's a blessing. It's considered a blessing. The devotee doesn't have a little checklist, accept, reject, accept, reject. Everything sent by Krishna is a blessing for the devotee. And as a result, Maharaj Parikshit, he was neither afraid nor was he bewildered at all. And this is a sign of a pure devotee. And we can add, as per today's verse, neither was he angry. Having gotten such a curse, one could imagine maybe has some cause for anger. But Maharaj Parikshit, Narayana Parayana, was not afraid, nor bewildered, nor angry. So one can give up all connection with material attachment when one sees the superior quality of things. We learn from the Gita that the quality of the Lord's energy is that it is superior to the material quality of energy. And by the grace of a bona fide spiritual master, it's quite possible to know everything of the superior energy of the Lord. So unless one can understand this superior or the eternal energy of the Lord, it's not possible to turn your back or leave aside the material energy. There will always be some connection. Now, we also find out it's very difficult to find the Lord from the Vedic literature, yet it's very easy to know him by the mercy of a liberated devotee, such as Sukadeva Goswami and Srila Prabhupada. Just as Sukadeva Goswami did not sugarcoat the absolute truth or offer any temporary feel-good, pamper-me artificial solutions to Maharaj Pariksit, Srila Prabhupada spoke bravely and clearly on the topics of transcendence, and he was protecting his temples and his devotees from being exploited by those who were looking to profit materially from ISKCON. One example occurred in Krishna Balaram temple when it was opened up, and Prabhupada was very eager to have people come and stay with us and learn from us Krishna consciousness. So there was a retired businessman from Delhi, and he came and he purported he wanted to join and serve. But as soon as he got a room, just quite quickly, he began using his room to do business. Like he was supposed to be retired, and suddenly there he was doing business. And when Prabhupada heard about this, he instructed the devotees to tell him to leave. And he compared that man to an eagle. Like an eagle can fly very, very high in the sky and look down to the earth and see small, small creatures, which he will then dive bomb for food. So this man had been given a very great opportunity to come to the highest platform of human life. And instead, he was only concerned how to make some personal financial profit. And we see now even how persons are coming to exploit devotees, to make money off of devotees. In one case, by offering to pamper their face for $40. It's embarrassing that misleading non-spiritual activities are being promoted in Prabhupada's temples. When in doubt, we should shadow Guru. It means follow the Guru. Sadhu Sastra. And if some peoples want to come and offer their talent in service to devotees, that's another thing. But that's not what happens. People are unwilling to give up material exploitation, and it means for their own, doing something that will benefit them. And they come to the temple to charge fees for the useless services, exploiting the Dham and the devotees. So these type of activities cannot be counted as devotional service, and they were absolutely not permitted by His divine grace. And Srila Prabhupada was very careful to make sure we understood these points. Otherwise, because of our own past addiction to material life, we could also fall into such mentality again. So by this spiritual scientific adaptation, one is able to remember the Lord even at the end of life. And when the power of remembrance is slackened or impaired due to derangement of the bodily membranes, in other words, at the time of death, different things are going on in the body and we have no control over them. The temperature rises high, it goes down. Like when you're hot, you're cold, you start shaking involuntarily, you lose control of functions like, passing. So for a common person, it's very difficult to remember things as they are at the time of death. But by the grace of the Lord and His bona fide devotees and the spiritual masters, one gets this opportunity without difficulty. And we just see how Maharaj Pariksit was immediately willing to accept his situation. And the only thing he wanted to do was hear about the process of transcendence. Tell me, what is a man about to die supposed to do? And he wasn't distracted. Oh, by the way, I have to do this or that. Will somebody do this or that? No, just hear. And recently, I had a very extraordinary opportunity to have the association of a young devotee, age 42, married, 2 children, who was on the verge of departure for a long time, it was not quite clear, could she make it or not? So there was always that kind of balance, an attempt to like see if she could, conquer the material situation, the disease, or just put it aside and just forget everything and surrender to the impending death. So of course, when you're not sure, it's a little confusing. I had that situation myself in 1989, so I didn't know. I'm in the hospital, I'm all tubed up. Am I coming or going? And because of that, it was hard for me to know what to do exactly. But then, to the circumstances, devotees came, they chanted, that cleared my mind. And then I had Krishna sent a doctor who was really perceptive, and he just said to me, it's up to you. If you want, you can live. Now, well, as soon as he said that, my whole mind went into what, and it was clear that what I should do was clear. But here was a situation where it wasn't so clear, and but then it became clear that her body was no longer suitable for habitation. It was not going to heal. And as soon as that was clear, and the doctors told the husband, the family, just call the family members, and of course for us, family means all the devotees, so her room was filled with devotees. It was also online for those who couldn't get there. I was not able to be there, I was there online. And you were watching this person who was surrounded by devotees, her family was there. It could have been very confusing, but she had practiced Krishna consciousness so seriously that now she understood what her duty was, and she let go of any connection to the family and to the surroundings, and just became absorbed in the chanting. And as this was going on, she was slowly becoming very radiant, like illuminated and beautiful. She was fearless, she wasn't confused, and she achieved the goal of life in her auspicious passing, surrounded by devotees. And her spiritual master, Radhanath Swami, who remained with her for the 2.5 hours the last 2.5 hours of her life. So there was an example how, by the grace of the Lord and his bona fide devotees and spiritual masters, one gets this opportunity to depart without difficulty. So we should always be clear about the goal and mission of life in all instances, because we don't know when that exit will come. And instead of vibrating nonsense sounds for sense enjoyment, Prabhupada made a very bold statement. If the state and country arranges to distribute transcendental sound by resounding the holy names, fame, and activities of the Lord as they are authorized in the Bhagavad Gita and the Bhagavatam, then a favorable condition will be created, and the principles of religion in the world will be reestablished. And those executive heads who are anxious to drive away corruption from the world, they'll be successful. And the choice, the way he presented it, those executive heads who are anxious to drive away corruption. Because, of course, when somebody is trying to get the vote, they're going to speak against corruption and they'll clean it all up. But actually, they just say that to get the vote. But as soon as they get the vote, they're right down to corrupt business as normal. So those who are actually sincerely anxious, then they'll be successful if they follow the prescribed message from the Bhagavatam. Nothing, and broadcast widely the transcendental sound vibrations. And Srila Prabhupada commented, nothing is bad if it's used for the service of the Lord. And then in another place, he was commenting, if those leaders cannot control their senses, how will they be able to control an entire nation? And we've seen how attempts like that ultimately fail. Throughout history, one person becomes so powerful that anybody and everybody will do what that person says, but ultimately they're doomed because they cannot control their senses. So by the will of the Lord, the living being does not become a victim of sinful acts until the act is actually performed. So this is now in Kali Yuga that we, like in other ages, simply by thinking of performing a sinful act, one became a victim of the act. They didn't even have to do it, just by thought. But now, by the will of the Lord, a living being doesn't become a victim until the act is actually performed. Like, on the contrary, a living being in this age is awarded with the results of pious activities simply by thinking about them. Now, we have to be careful how we use this, because it's quite a serious consideration. I had one time a young Sankirtan devotee under my care, and she was constantly, thinking about a certain activity with a certain someone, but she would think, I'm not actually doing it, I'm just thinking about it. And then one time, because when she was out in Sankirtan in another city, Krishna made the arrangement for that person who she was thinking about to cross her path. And because she'd been meditating like that, she fell into unfortunate situation and fell down. And of course, she felt really sorry afterwards. And she understood that just by thinking, the next thing we'll be doing when the opportunity occurs. So we have to be careful what we think about and how we think. It is said that by the discourse on the Lord's activities, then one can get rid of all the disadvantages of the age of Kali. And I think most of us are pretty knowledgeable about the apparent disadvantages of the age of Kali. But in the beginning of the Bhagavatam, it is said that by the recitation of the Bhagavatam, the Supreme Lord becomes at once arrested, means captured within one's heart. So this along with not being penalized for just thinking about sinful activities and capturing the Lord in the heart just by hearing the Bhagavatam, these are some of the advantages of the age of Kali, that it will not be possible to bring about a saner condition in society unless we're prepared to accept the modes of actions as adopted by Maharaj Pariksit, and that is propagation of devotional service of the Lord to the common person. Maharaj Pariksit is he's our hero. He's our role model. Of course, we have so many role models, but Maharaj Pariksit, he's an outstanding role model in the matter of life and death. The Bhagavatam is the history of the activities of the Lord. And the activities of the Lord, they're performed in relationship with the devotees of the Lord. It's not like the Lord is off in some closet doing stuff hidden and by himself. Everything he does involves interactions with his devotees. And the devotees of the Lord regard both the activities of the Lord and of his pure devotees on an equal level because they're transcendental. It's not, we hear this, but we have to remember that the devotee of the Lord is on an equal level of the Lord because they are fully engaged 100% in the activities of the Lord and speaking about the Lord. And in this way, the equality is through their transcendental words and actions. Of course, one doesn't become fully equal with the Lord ever. The systematic hearing of the transcendental activities of the qualities and names of the Lord pushes us towards eternal life. And the systematic hearing means knowing him gradually in truth and in fact. And this knowing him in truth and fact means attaining eternal life as per the Bhagavad Gita. Sometimes it is said that immediately upon chanting the holy name or hearing the name, immediately you're freed, and actually freed from all kinds of karmic activities and sinful activities, etc. And actually this can be a fact. But for most of us, the immediate reaction is generally a little bit delayed, and therefore generally it's a gradual, so knowing him gradually in truth and fact. But it's not, it doesn't mean that it's any less potent. It just means some of us are a lot more heavily covered, and it takes a little gradual effort to reveal the actual truth. The systematic hearing of the transcendental activities and qualities and names of the Lord just pushes us. It pushes us, and we need those pushes. So therefore, we need to become willing and open to hearing on a daily basis. Was another interesting note in one of the verses that in the purports that the sacrificial fire kindled by the sages of Namasaran was full of smoke and doubts because of so many flaws. So then Prabhupada pointed out that the first flaw is that there is an acute scarcity of expert Brahmins to successfully carry out such performances in this age. So any discrepancy of such a sacrifice spoils everything, and the result is uncertain. And Prabhupada compared it to like agricultural enterprises. So the good result of tilling the paddy field depends on torrential providential rain. And therefore the result's uncertain because you don't know when is that rain going to come. You can ask any farmer. They put the seeds in, and of course they used to do, like just like in the Govardhan Hill Leela, there was Maharaj Nanda doing the sacrifice to Lord Indra to make sure the rains would come. But of course nowadays even this climate is being challenged, and instead of praying to Krishna for his help or depending on Krishna, now they have these solar geoengineers, and they want to geoengineer the earth. They want to spray these highly reflective particles of a material such as sulfur into the stratosphere in order to deflect the sunlight, and in doing so cool the planet. I mean, this is seriously, it's a serious science, and this is what they're thinking now. So it would be the second most expansive project that humans have ever taken. Like the first is the ongoing emission, like trying to control the emissions of carbon and other heat trapping gases. And the idea behind this solar geoengineering is to essentially mimic what happens, what volcanoes, like when a volcano explodes, it pushes particles into the atmosphere. And so what can happen was demonstrated in 1992 in the Philippines. There was this Mount Pinatubo, and it just was a massive eruption. And then for the next 2 years, there was a measurable cool in the world, right? That was a year or two. So these scientists are thinking, yeah, we can shoot these chemicals into the air, we'll cool the sun down if things go as planned, but we know how plans usually don't go as planned. So this is a plan. At first people just thought it was a joke, but now they're taking it seriously because of the horrors that come with the overheating of the world. And it's now just an undeniable fact that populated places, densely populated places are being threatened. We see here in America, rivers and lakes are drying up, and entire cities in America are facing possible extinction due to the impending loss of water. It's what's being faced. So when there are these type of situations that are actually man-made situations, then you're going to have man-made reactions. And it's something that has to be considered. And as devotees, the best thing that we can do is to be mindful in the way we conduct ourselves, and with great force take part and spread the Yuga Dharma. When there's another lesson is when there are similar points, it's impossible. I mean, it is possible to compare one thing to another. So the example was things have to be similar in order to compare. So one can't compare the association of a pure devotee to anything material, because pure devotees of the Lord, they're engaged in transcendental existence. And what is that? It's loving service to the Lord, both in the material world and in the spiritual world. In other words, a devotee is never materially enveloped, and wherever they are, they will be engaged in loving service to the Lord. So you can't compare a devotee to a non-devotee. There just never is any point of comparison. And actually that beautiful verse, 18, Tulayama Lavanapi, that the value of a moment's association with the devotee of the Lord cannot even be compared to the attainment of heavenly planets, our liberation from matter, what to speak of worldly benedictions in the form of material prosperity. And here's the part that's so beautiful. Prabhupada says, material prosperity, which are for those who are meant for death. So the path of a devotee is assuredly clear as long as one is ready to accept the teachings of the pure devotees. So just like there's no end to transcendental discourses, like in the mundane world, in mundane affairs, there's what is known as the law of satiation. It means after a while, you just don't want to hear it anymore. But in transcendence, there's no such satiation. Since the Lord is transcendental and his attributes are transcendental, these discourses increase the receptivity of the purified audience. So the audience is purified by hearing from such a person, and by hearing the audience becomes purified, and their eagerness to hear more is enhanced. And such discourses, like between the saints of Namasharana and Sutta Goswami, they're on the transcendental level. There was no motive for material gain. They didn't have to register. They didn't have to pay a fee. And such discourses, I'm not knocking some, I mean, there's a reason nowadays to sometimes, we have to do these things out of practicality, but the point being there was no motive for material gain. So in such discourses, unlimited transcendental pleasure is relished by both the audience and the speaker. And as such, then they can continue these topics for thousands of years. Just consider, we are reading Bhagavatam, we're studying daily, at least we're trying to, or hope we are. And this has been going on, since before time, as Prabhupada would say, time immemorial. So one time somebody asked Prabhupada, what does it mean, time immemorial? And Prabhupada explained, it cannot be calculated. You cannot find the beginning or the end. So these nowadays, so earlier today, when we were starting, the person speaking, he was kind of joking about staying awake for the class. But this comes to this point. Now the Bhagavatam Saptas are held, Prabhupada mentions, only for 7 days. Like, we're only speak for 7 days in the Bhagavatam, and that's going to be enough to bring the whole purports of the Bhagavatam. And then after finishing the show, both the audience and the speaker become engaged in material activities as usual. So, here are we, Bhagavatam is only 45 minutes, maybe an hour, and still we fall asleep because the speaker is not Bhagavat Pradhana, meaning fully realized, and the audience is not Sushushastamam. I mean, basically, it falls down to just like when we're chanting and we have trouble chanting. Why is that? Why do we have trouble staying awake and being attentive? Because, okay, in some cases we're just exhausted, but generally it's because of lack of interest. So we have to work on developing our interest, because once that interest is there, then it's easy to chant continuously, Kirtanaya Sadahari, to chant continuously, and to sit and hear Bhagavatam for thousands of years. In many instances in the transcendental histories of the world, there are impersonalists who, due to hearing, they later become a devotee. But Prabhupada commented, a devotee has never become an impersonalist. The simple knowledge of liberation, it's material knowledge. But actual freedom from material bondage, then the actual freedom, is called liberation, but the attainment of transcendental service of the Lord, that is the perfect stage of liberation. So the simple liberation, we understand I'm not the body. So that's a certain level. But then what? Then what? And the transcendental service of the Lord, that's a perfect stage of liberation. And such a stage is obtained by knowledge and renunciation, and it results in the attainment of transcendental service to the Lord. That is the perfection. That is Bhakti Yoga. Sutta Goswami, for that matter, he didn't take his birth in a Brahmana family. Actually, he was born in a family of mixed caste or an uncultured low family. But because of higher association, like Sukadeva Goswami and the great rishis of Naimisharanya, this disqualification of so-called inferior birth was washed off. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu followed this principle in pursuance of Vedic usage. And by his transcendental association, he elevated many lowborn, are those, by lowborn we mean disqualified by birth or action. But to this, he elevated them to the status of devotional service, and he established them in the position of acharyas or authorities. Lord Chaitanya clearly stated that any man, whoever he may be, any person, whoever he may be, whether a Brahmin, Sudra by birth, or a householder, a mendicant, male, female, in the order of society, if he's conversant with the science of Krishna, he can be accepted as an acharya or a guru, a spiritual master. And Lord Chaitanya wanted to purify the whole atmosphere of the polluted world by sending qualified preachers all over the world. And it remains, then Prabhupada made this comment, it remains with the Indians to take up this task scientifically. And thus to do the best kind of humanitarian work. So the mental disease of the present generation are more acute than bodily diseases. Now consider, this purport was before he came to America. Mental diseases of the present generation are more acute than bodily disease, and what to speak of the present moment. It's actually astounding how these purports are so much in tune with what we are experiencing nowadays. And therefore it's completely proper and befitting and urgently necessary to take up the preaching of Srimad Bhagavatam all over the world without delay. This is Prabhupada's words. Quite proper to take up the preaching of Bhagavatam all over the world without delay. This is an example of Srila Prabhupada's compassionate sense of urgency all over the world without delay. And thus he sent bands of young persons to foreign countries, often in dangerous circumstances, to assist Lord Chaitanya's mission. There's one conversation where Srila Prabhupada was talking about how Lord Dwarkadish, this is in Los Angeles, so Dwarkadish, he wanted Prabhupada to go back to India. Prabhupada didn't want to go. He didn't want to go because his spiritual master had given him the Western world to preach in. And Prabhupada considered that his godbrothers, they were given India to preach. So there was no need of him to be in India. And furthermore, he had just gotten the LA Temple Watsika Avenue facility, and he wanted to develop that as his world headquarters for the Hare Krishna movement. But in this conversation, Prabhupada said that Lord Dwarkadish ordered me to go. And he said, I was talking with the deity, I was arguing with Dwarkadish, I don't want to go. And Dwarkadish was commanding me to go. I want you to go. And Prabhupada was saying, but I have this very nice temple. I want to develop it. And then Lord Dwarkadish said, all right, I want you to go to India. That if you go to India, I will give you a temple that is better than this Watsika. And then Prabhupada couldn't refuse. He said, all right. And then Prabhupada came to India, and Srila Prabhupada got Krishna Balaram Mandir, Kijai, followed by the beautiful temple in Bombay, and then, of course, Mayapur, his world-class gemstones. And then in 71, he was giving these big public programs in India. And one evening, this Arya Samajas challenged Prabhupada. Arya Samajas are like a sect of anyway, they're a sect in India. They're generally Mayavadi type impersonalists. So he came, he goes, Swamiji, you've come to India with your Western chelas. Kind of a little insulting, your Western chelas. But we know all these things. We know all these things. When we were first in India, sent by Prabhupada, I can't tell you how many times a day people would come up. We know everything. We know all these things. This is our culture. So this man was saying that. He goes, better you go to other places and do your work there. So, all right, you've been to the West, but what about the Muslim countries? What about Pakistan? You should go to Pakistan and preach there, make them devotees. But this is in a public pandal with thousands of people. And Prabhupada said, are you challenging us to go? Man said, yes, I challenge you. You must go immediately to Pakistan. And Prabhupada said, all right, we'll go. And he wrote a letter to Brahmananda. Immediately go to West Pakistan. And he wrote to his brother Gargamuni, immediately go to East Pakistan. And immediately they did. Brahmananda didn't have any money. He was in America and he had to hitchhike from Florida to New York. Gargamuni had some money, so he flew. But Brahmananda had to get over to Europe, and then he had to hitchhike, going overland, taking buses, trains, whatever to go. And at that time, a war was starting. And, we didn't have these instant messaging systems at that point. So we weren't aware that the war was starting right away. So when Prabhupada found out about the war and the hostilities between Pakistan and India, he wrote a second letter. I advise you not to go at this time. But, this is not on Instagram, it's not on WhatsApp, it's not on email, so it takes a while for the letters to reach. So they never even got the letter, they'd already left, and they walked right into a war situation. And Brahmananda was describing, and, for those of you in Africa, I'm sure you know who Brahmananda is. So it was difficult, they were preaching, they're trying to do something. He was in Karachi. And north of Karachi is the Singh Desert. It's the hottest place in the world, 125 degrees. It was May, the hottest month. And immediately he was sick with dysentery, had no books. People were spitting on him, threatening to put a knife in his back when they'd have kirtan. In fact, it was kind of amazing because he was with Jaganivas and Gargamuni was with Pusta Krishna. So anyway, people would spit on them when they'd have kirtan, and they would rub their tilak off. What a situation. How many of us have had to face that type of reaction? And then a report appeared in the Pakistani and Indian newspapers saying 4 Hare Krishna missionaries are shot. So Karandar was in Bombay and he shows Prabhupada the newspaper report, and there were no names. But there was 4, there was Gargamuni and Pusta and Jaganivas and Brahmananda, 4 of them. So Prabhupada was so deserved, he thought that they'd all been shot. So at that time, Brahmananda, he sent a telegram to Prabhupada and he just said, can I get out of here? And Prabhupada immediately telegrammed back, come immediately, Bhaktivedanta Swami, 4 words. So Brahmananda said, those were the best 4 words. Get out of that country. It was a big thing. And somehow they were able to get out. And he went to Bombay to the Kashganga building where we were staying. And when he walked in his room, Prabhupada immediately stood up. He came over and he put his arms around him and he was hugging Brahmananda to his chest. And Brahmananda described he was putting his hands all over me, just like a mother would touch her child if she thinks the child was hurt. Like the mother always wants to see that the child is intact. So that's another instance all over the world. Urgent is urgent. I was with the devotees with Prabhupada in Calcutta when the insurgents began. And at night there was these mandatory blackouts and curfews. And nevertheless, somehow we were carrying on. But some devotees, they were becoming fearful of the possible consequences. What will we do? What should we do? And Prabhupada said, what can we do? Chant Hare Krishna. If they're coming with their planes and dropping bombs, what can we do? Chant Hare Krishna. And then he told us the story how during World War II, when India was being attacked, they were dropping bombs, he just stayed in his kitchen cooking kachuris for his deities. You know, what can you do? So a pure devotee of the Lord is always connected to Krishna at all times. Doesn't commit offenses while chanting the holy name because they're under the protection of the pure devotees. There are like 10 offenses to chanting the holy name of the Lord, but to chant the holy names under the direction of pure devotee, that is offenseless chanting. And real independence means complete faith in the mercy of the Lord without dependence on the conditions of matter. And, you know, factually, it's only Krishna himself. Only Krishna can describe himself, and his learned devotees can also describe him as far as the Lord gives him the power of description. This is one of the other verses. So this is something that Prabhupada would often say, you know, like, Prabhupada, you know everything. And he would respond, I only know what Krishna wants me to know. So the topic of anger is in this verse. And anger is also usable in Krishna's service. In fact, one time Prabhupada bewildered all of the devotees by appearing to become angry with a foolish member of an audience who was just speaking incoherent nonsense and would not stop. And Prabhupada became really angry. And devotees, even the devotees were like surprised. How is this? But Srila Prabhupada's anger was a tool controlled by him in Krishna's service. Sometimes he would appear to become angry with foolish disciples who would do something completely thoughtlessly, and at the next moment, without any sign or tinge of anger, it would be gone. He used anger, it didn't use him. And there's a righteous use of anger. One time, Prabhupada mentioned, there was a whole discussion about anger and nonviolence and all that. And Prabhupada said, if you see someone attacking me and you do nothing, is that a very good thing? And actually, one time in Bombay, we had a big program, and there was a side room on the side of the main, you know, connected to the main tent, but a little side room. I think you call it in English the green room. So, you know, we would receive important guests there, and there was always a group of us there to speak to these people when they would come. So I happened to be there one evening, and this man came, a very prominent person, but he came in and he started criticizing Srila Prabhupada for saying Krishna's a person and etc. And he just went on and on. And suddenly, without even a premeditated thought, I just like punched him. I punched him in his stomach, which was kind of a big stomach. Even I was surprised, but I just couldn't tolerate that he was criticizing Srila Prabhupada like that. And Giriraj Swami, he was brahmachari at the time, but he was quite impressed by that somebody would actually do that. You know, he even mentions it to this day sometimes. Of course, you know, we're told you have an option, either try to convince the person otherwise, or else just leave. And if you can't do that, then kill yourself. It's pretty rare, I think, that anybody would take the last option, kill themselves, but it's an option. Nrsingadev, the expansion of Lord Krishna, expressed his anger in an extremely dramatic manner when his pure devotee was being tortured. And Lord Chaitanya called upon his Sudarshan Chakra. And we, of course, have the beautiful example of Vladini Devi Dasi, who gave up her life in Africa, using anger against the rebels for slaughtering devotees, running right in their face. You cannot kill devotees. Who has that courage? Who has that courage, you know? So we have this beautiful verse that was given, and it's saying the king's anger and envy directed toward the Brahmana was unprecedented. But then it's explained that the situation. He was hungry, he was thirsty, he was overcome, but actually it was being ordained by the Lord. So we definitely have to be very careful how we use anger, and we have to be very careful that we don't put ourselves in Maharaj Parikshit's, I was going to say shoes, but don't compare ourselves to Maharaj Parikshit, thinking that our anger is ordained by the Lord. But it's a very great lesson, and it can be bewildering if we're not fully conversant with the science of Krishna consciousness. So all glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to the assembled devotees, and all glories to SRIMAD Bhagavatam.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Mother Malati. Oh, Krishna. It's always so beautiful hearing from you in particular, and of course, hearing from all of your God brothers and God sisters, because when we, the next generation, look at your sacrifices to helping Srila Prabhupada establish ISKCON, all we can say is thank you, thank you, thank you. And we hope we can emulate your example and continue the same sacrifice and dedication to making Krishna consciousness even bigger than it is now. So, okay, you have something to say?
I would just, yes.
Yes, please.
You know, what we did, we started the fire. You know, that's a fact. But in starting that fire, many, many others have come forward, kept that fire going, and are making sacrifices till this day as we speak. Otherwise, this movement would not be going on. So to all of you, my head is bowed, because starting the fire, it's relatively easy. Keeping that fire going and expanding it, that is the challenge. And yet that is the duty of all of you who are coming after us and continuing. Srila Prabhupada gave a standing order to all members at all times, which is, my dear boys and girls, please help push on this movement. So you all have that order on your head, in your heart, and that's how this movement is able to survive and expand. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for teaching us this example of humility in appreciation also. Thank you so much. So dear devotees, if anyone has a question, comment, please indicate that by using the hand emoji or your physical hand, and you'll be asked to unmute and speak. Yes.
I see somebody is driving.
Oh yes, Govinda Prabhu is always driving, and he's always listening to Bhagavatam while driving. But he uses hands-free, so he's quite okay.
Okay.
Thank you for the concern. Devotees, anyone with any question? Go ahead, please. Shrimara Prabhu. Hare Krishna, go ahead.
My Dandavat Pranam, Mother. All glories to Prabhupada. All glories to this. Yeah, hearing you.
Is it possible to turn on your camera? Is it possible? If not, if it's not, okay. But if you can, please turn it on.
Haribol, Acharya Dev, Hare Krishna.
Okay. Hare Krishna.
Hearing you speak about the mood of Prabhupada, the urgency of spreading Krishna consciousness all over the world. And somehow or the other, we got that kind of feelings when we were working with Brahmananda Prabhu and Bhakti Maharaj. We had that sense of urgency also. And it's a very good thing that you share with us this story of Brahmananda Prabhu going to Pakistan under a very difficult situation. What I want to say, and of course, also while you were speaking, and especially when you were talking about that mood of urgency, I was kind of like hearing Mother Eladini at the background, because after hearing her many times speaking, she was always also under that kind of mood, you know. So I was more or less like feeling her speaking through you. And then eventually you also mention her name. So I could connect that, actually that energy is the one speaking. All of you were together and we can feel it from you. Now, my question is the fact that, I don't know, maybe in other places, but I want to believe that that kind of urgency and that kind of missionary spirit, it's like dying down, even though you're like saying that starting the fire is nothing much, but keeping it going. But then the urgency that I experienced when I joined Krishna Consciousness Movement, that urgency you're speaking about, I don't feel it again. Of course, I try to continue maintaining my spirit in that way. And I pray that Guru Krishna will help me to continue. But around me, I feel, I sense it less. So what can you advise?
Well, what does Srila Prabhupada do was that he would seek out a spark and he would fan it like anything. So the first thing individually we can do is fan whatever spark may still be in our hearts. Even in my own life, I mean, my life is coming to the final chapters now, and I see I have to push. So if we stop pushing ourselves, we can't inspire anyone else. So if we're truly concerned about other people becoming, taking on this feeling of urgency, it also has to be displayed in our actions. Now, as we get older, it may be, less available to do some of the physical things that we formerly did, but Prabhupada said there is no material impediment to preaching. And the example was his own example at the time of his departure when he could not do anything for himself, but still on that deathbed, he was speaking into a microphone that was held by his lotus lips and giving the purports to the SRIMAD BHAGAVATAM. 10th canto, 13th chapter. So no impediment to the possibility of preaching. If we keep that in mind, then it's a little easier to give ourselves a little push, and in that way, others may take notice and follow.
Okay, thank you. There is a follow-up. You also mentioned about examples of people who take advantage of the temple and want to just use that to benefit themselves. And well, Srila Prabhupada was against it. He asked the guy to be sent out. But I may say that from observation, more and more of that is happening. And it becomes like the more you are able to actually get into business and bring money, then you become more important.
The difference, so I just want to make a little clarification that man was not, he was doing business for himself. He was given a room in the temple, and yet he was starting to do business for himself. He wasn't giving the money to the temple. If that had been the case, it would have been no problem.
Yes.
That's called exploitation.
I understand you perfectly.
Okay.
My question still stands. It's becoming more and more difficult to actually make people renounce 100%. And of course, they may come with the intention to want to serve, but then they get the opportunities to use their business acumen to bring money for the temple, right? But then, of course, they also establish themselves. And the more of that is happening, and we are having more of Vaishya running temples than true Brahmanas, That is
the Brahmanas were not intended to run the temples. That's, the Kshatriyas or the Vaishya can do that, but they should be acting under the advice and authority of the Brahmanas to keep things on the spiritual level. But if you don't have Brahmanas giving instructions, or the leaders don't listen to the Brahmanas' instructions, and they don't read Prabhupada's books, and they don't chant, what you're describing is what you can expect. So it was the depth of spirituality that was present during Prabhupada's time that propelled us. And if we can work a little on that, I think we could very easily come back to that standard of intensity that allowed us to go forward and expand this movement fearlessly.
Okay, thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Mother Hare Krishna. Anyone else with any question? Mother, I had a question, but it seems like the question was answered by you. Even though I did not ask the question, it seems you answered the question, but I was still asked to see if you can add more juice to the question. And that is, you were talking about how sometimes it is said in the scriptures, just by chanting the holy name of the Lord once, immediately.
Yeah.
But for most of us, it is not immediate, it's gradual. It's gradual.
Yes.
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 So, and you also talked about the sages in Naimisharanya, where their whole body had become black due to the smoke. And so you were also saying, which had already been said by Srila Prabhupada, that part of the reason of what they were lacking was because they did not have qualified Brahmins. So
yeah, but that comment was specifically for the present.
yes,
At that time, at that time there may be a lacking, but there may be a lack, but they still existed. Now they don't even exist.
now they don't exist, yes. So there is one temple in India, I think Kerala, Padmanayana Swami temple, where it is said that they have some secret vaults that contain lots of gems. And there is one particular door that has no hinges or anything. It has no padlock, nothing. It can only be opened by mantras. And up till now, the door has not been able to be opened because there are no qualified Brahmins to chant the specific Garuda mantra to open the door. Now, my question is, if we do not have qualified Brahmins to chant mantras to open such a door, then how come, or how is it possible that in this same age, we can perform some sort of service and go back to the kingdom of God? But I also received some sort of an answer from this question by the inspiring story you shared about Brahmananda and his brother going to Pakistan, taking that risk. And Srila Prabhupada was so much worried, concerned when they came back finally. Srila Prabhupada was petting them like a mother will pet the child. So that tells me that even though one may not have the qualification, but with the assistance and love of the spiritual master, everything is possible. Is that the case?
That is the case. It also mentioned how by chanting under the direction of a pure devotee, that is considered offenseless chanting. Not that you take advantage of that, but you understand. The thing is, we all come in with different degrees of contamination. And the example is given like a log. A dry log immediately takes to fire. A wet log takes some time to burn. Eventually, it will burn. Most of us are these wet logs. But the idea is to just don't get discouraged and keep fanning that fire. And when a little spark appears, fan a little more, fan a little more. This was what Prabhupada did. How else could we have gone on otherwise? Sometimes some of the stuff we were doing, just materially speaking, was like made no sense. How, even starting some of these temples in remote areas with nothing, and not even any money, not any contacts. Probably say start a temple here, and it would happen through the desire and the endeavor of the pure devotee. And we just became his little puppets.
Yeah.
And it's still possible today because like I mentioned, that standing order, help push on this movement. It's there. Each one of you, it's inherent upon initiation. You get a spiritual master, but your guru is a member of ISKCON. As a member of ISKCON, your guru, and all of us have the same mandate. Help push on this movement. This is a preaching and teaching movement. And the byproduct, the wonderful goal is love of God.
Thank you so much, Mother. Anyone else with any questions before we let Mother go?
So I
See,
think tomorrow
okay,
is,
go ahead, yes.
tomorrow is, I meant to say something in the beginning. Tomorrow is Gita Jayante. This is the beginning of our massive book distribution marathon. Of course, every day, every month is an opportunity to distribute books, but December has, been our traditional push. So I'm, offering everybody my best wishes, my blessings that you will have a successful marathon, not only externally by giving out these books, but internally gain the realizations you need to continue your Krishna consciousness successfully.
Yeah, I think tomorrow is a Kadashi also.
It's also a Kadashi. You're doubly blessed.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mother. But I think I had one. I think it has skipped my mind. Well, I remember now. I had one quick question. That is, Srila Prabhupada, when he fell ill, when he was here in the US in the early stages. And that was when you were talking about how important and how relevant, of course, all of Srila Prabhupada books are, but most importantly, they come to one of Bhagavatam. And what I'm seeing, and it's kind of realization I'm getting or observation I'm getting from your class, that Srila Prabhupada seemed to be the only person on earth who could predict in present tense. Usually when people predict it, they predict in future tense. But like what you were reading, like the mental distress, which is now the problem the whole world is facing. And he wrote it long before he even came to the West.
Yeah.
And he didn't know physically, he didn't know much what was going on in the West.
Yes.
Yet he wrote it at that time in present tense.
Yes.
But it was going to be a future thing. So that is one thing I'm observing from this. And thank you so much for sharing that. Thank
Hare
you.
Krishna.
Yeah, Hare Krishna.
All glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to all of you. Hare Krishna, and thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to be with you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, thank you so much for always being here and expressing and sharing your love with us all the time. There is no way we can express our appreciation or make any attempt to pay you back other than, again, request from you that you kindly pray for us that we never stay away from Srila Prabhupada's lotus feet. Hare Krishna. So at this point, we're going to humbly request all the devotees to kindly unmute, and then we chant Hare Krishna mantra to express our appreciation for Mother Malati for being here and guiding us through the SRIMAD Bhagavatam. Jai Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna,
Krishna,
Krishna
Hare
Hare
Hare,
Hare,
Hare Rama,
Hare Rama, Hare
Rama
Hare.
Hare Hare
Namaha.
all glories to the
Hare
grace of
Krishna.
DEVI ki.
Jai.